The U.S. military's top brass summoned to Quantico, Virginia, 800 top officers. Secretary Hegseth outlining his vision, what's now expected of those military leaders, and talking about the highest male standard only for all of those who serve in the U.S. military. Then President Trump on stage, the president saying he has told Secretary Hegseth we should use some dangerous cities as training grounds for our military. Here's Martha Raddatz.
In an unprecedented meeting, which the former Weekend Fox and Friends host broadcast live, Secretary Pete Hegseth warning hundreds of combat-tested generals, admirals, and senior officers flown in from around the world that the military under his leadership will be dramatically changed.
No more identity months, DEI offices, dudes in dresses. No more climate change worship. No more division, distraction, or gender delusions. No more debris. We are done with that.
Welcome, guys. Adam is here. So this is what just happened. A four-star general, one of the most decorated officers in the country, looks directly at the President of the United States and calls him a traitor. On live television, with cameras rolling, with the entire world watching.
We are unique among the world's armies. We are unique among the world's militaries. We don't take an oath to a country. We don't take an oath to a tribe. We don't take an oath to a religion. We don't take an oath to a king or a queen or to a tyrant or a dictator. And we don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator. We don't take an oath to an individual. We take an oath to the Constitution, and we take an oath to the idea that it's America, and we're willing to die to protect it.
This is not a movie. This is not a leaked memo that surfaces years later. This is not an anonymous source speaking to a reporter. This happened in real time, in front of millions of Americans who watched it unfold. And within hours, the internet absolutely exploded. The hashtag was everywhere. 22,000 posts on one platform alone within hours. Twitter was on fire.
Today, the president made what are widely called unusual, perhaps unprecedented remarks in the modern era. And I'm going to show you exactly what he said and why military veterans and many other experts on a nonpartisan basis say this is one of those inflection points you need to confront. It is unusual to gather this many members of the military in peacetime. The president made this public address so everyone can see and hear what he is saying to the military. And he explicitly said this military under this Trump administration must better focus on attacking, quote, the enemy within. And as for the controversial and sometimes legally overruled use of just the National Guard in America, the president rhetorically pushing past that, explaining that he views the military, which we'll show you was quite careful to be quiet during what are widely seen as partisan remarks. He will use the military on American cities for what he calls a training ground for a new type of war.
But here's the detail that makes this even more shocking. This was not one general going rogue. This was multiple top military commanders standing together, publicly refusing presidential orders and telling the commander-in-chief to his face that they would not do what he was asking, that his demands were unconstitutional, that their oath was to the Constitution, not to him. So what exactly did the president ask them to do that was so extreme that his own generals felt compelled to call him a traitor on national television? The answer is simple and terrifying. Donald Trump wanted to use the military for what he called training grounds in Democratic-run cities. He wanted to deploy active-duty troops into American cities, cities governed by the opposing party, and call it urban warfare training. He wanted uniformed soldiers patrolling streets in places that did not vote for him. If that sounds insane, you are not alone. The generals thought so too. General Mark Milley, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, called it an abomination. Other generals backed him up. They said it was unconstitutional. They said it violated the Posse Comitatus Act, the federal law that limits the military's role in domestic law enforcement. They said no. And they said it on camera, in public, with the president sitting right there. Think about what is happening here. We are not talking about a policy disagreement. We are not talking about a budget fight or a strategic difference of opinion. We are talking about the President of the United States trying to deploy the military inside American cities, and his own top brass standing up and saying, "Absolutely not. That is illegal. That is unconstitutional. And if we did it, we would be the traitors." And Milley did not hold back. He looked Trump in the eye and said, "Our oath is to the Constitution, Mr. President. To betray that for any person, even you, is treason. Even you." That line broke the internet, because Milley was not just disagreeing. He was drawing a line in the sand. He was saying, "I do not care if you are the president. I do not care if you are my commander-in-chief. I took an oath to the Constitution, and I am keeping it. And if you want me to break that oath, then you are the traitor, not me." Now, of course, Trump fired back, because that is what he does. He cannot let anything go. He went on Truth Social and called Milley the real traitor. And then he went further. He said that what Milley did was so egregious that in past eras, the punishment would have been death. The President of the United States suggested that one of his own generals might deserve execution. Let that land for a moment. The Commander-in-Chief, the man who is supposed to lead the military, suggesting that a senior military officer should be executed for refusing an unconstitutional order. That is not normal. I know we say that a lot. I know everything feels insane these days. But this is actually, genuinely, historically not normal. This is the highest profile public rebellion against a sitting president by Pentagon leadership in modern American history. It has never happened before. Not like this. Not on live TV. Not with this many generals. Not with this much public pushback. And here is what makes it even more significant. This is not happening in a vacuum. For weeks, Trump has been pushing to invoke the Insurrection Act, an old law that allows the president to deploy the military inside the United States. He has been trying to use it to crack down on protests, to send troops into cities, to turn the military into his personal police force. And the generals are saying no. That is not what the military is for. That is not constitutional. And if you keep pushing this, we are going to keep pushing back. So that is where we are. The president versus his own generals on live TV, with one side calling the other traitors and the whole country watching. Let us step back and look at how we got here, because this did not come out of nowhere. This has been building for a while, and most people, they see the headlines, they see the clips, but they do not see the full picture of what is actually going on. Trump has been obsessed with using the military inside the United States. He has been talking about it for months. He has been pushing his advisors, his cabinet, anyone who will listen. He wants the Insurrection Act invoked. He wants troops in the streets. He wants the military doing domestic operations. Why? According to Trump, it is about law and order. He says Democratic-run cities are out of control. He says crime is skyrocketing. He says protests are getting violent. He says local police cannot handle it. So he wants to send in the military to restore order. But here is the problem. The numbers do not back that up. Crime rates in most major cities are actually down compared to previous years. Protests have been relatively peaceful, and local police departments are not asking for military backup. In fact, most mayors and governors are saying the opposite. They are saying, "Please do not send federal troops here. We have this handled. We do not want the military patrolling our streets." So if it is not really about crime, what is it about? Critics say, and this is where it gets uncomfortable, Trump wants the military as a political tool. He wants troops loyal to him in cities that did not vote for him as a show of force, as a way to intimidate opposition, as a way to flex power. And that is exactly what the generals are worried about. Because the military takes an oath to the Constitution, not to the president, not to a political party. And part of that oath is that the military does not get used for domestic political purposes. The military is not supposed to be the president's personal army. It is supposed to defend the country from external threats, not patrol American streets because the president does not like how people voted. When Trump pitched this training grounds idea, the generals saw right through it. The pitch was, we will call it training. We will say troops are just doing exercises in urban environments. We will frame it as readiness and preparedness. But everyone knows that is not what it is really about. It is about putting federal troops in democratic cities. It is about making a statement. It is about control, and the generals said no. Now, let us talk about Mark Milley specifically because his history with Trump makes this moment even more significant. Milley was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff under Trump. That is the highest-ranking military officer in the country. And during Trump's first term, Milley had serious disagreements with the president. There were reports of Milley pushing back on extreme ideas. There were leaks about tense meetings. And after January 6th, Milley was reportedly one of the voices saying, "We need to make sure the military stays out of politics. We need to make sure there is a peaceful transfer of power." Trump never forgot that. In fact, he has accused Milley before of being a traitor. He said Milley secretly communicated with China behind his back. He said Milley was part of the deep state. He said Milley was disloyal and should be investigated. So there was already bad blood. And now with Trump back in office and pushing these military deployments, Milley is back in the spotlight, and he is not backing down. At this summit in Quantico, which was supposed to be a routine briefing, Trump started pressuring the generals. He wanted commitments. He wanted loyalty pledges. He wanted them to agree to deploy troops domestically if he gave the order. And Milley, along with several other top generals, said no, not in private. Not in some closed-door meeting where they could quietly disagree and move on. They said no on camera with journalists watching, with the whole thing being live-streamed. Milley's exact words were, "Our oath is to the Constitution, Mr. President, to betray that for any person, even you, is treason." And then he doubled down. He said deploying troops into American cities for political purposes would be an abomination. He said it would violate the Posse Comitatus Act. He said it would set a dangerous precedent and undermine the foundations of civilian-military relations in this country. Other generals backed him up. They said the same thing. They made it clear, "We are not doing this. And if you try to make us, we are going to resist publicly." That is when the internet exploded. People could not believe what they were watching. Active and former military brass on live television telling the president no, calling his plans unconstitutional, using words like treason and abomination. Veterans groups weighed in. Legal experts analyzed what just happened. Political pundits lost their minds. The hashtag trended everywhere. And Trump, predictably, was furious. He fired off a series of posts on Truth Social. He called Milley the real traitor. He said the generals were part of a conspiracy against him. He accused them of being disloyal, of being part of the resistance, of trying to undermine his presidency. And then he went further. He posted that what Milley did was so egregious that in times gone by, the punishment would have been death. The President of the United States suggested that his own general might deserve execution. Now, Trump's defenders will say he was just being hyperbolic. They will say he was making a historical point about how treason used to be punished. They will say he was not literally calling for Milley to be executed. But you cannot say that. You are the president. You cannot suggest, even casually, that your political opponents or military leaders should be killed. That is banana republic stuff. That is authoritarian playbook 101. And it scared people because if Trump is willing to say that publicly, what is he saying privately? What is he planning? How far is he willing to go? And that is why this matters so much. This is not just a fight between Trump and some generals. This is a fight over what kind of country we are. This is a fight over whether the military answers to the Constitution or to one man. This is a fight over whether we have checks and balances or whether the president can do whatever he wants. Right now, the generals are saying the Constitution wins. We are not crossing that line. But Trump is still pushing. He is still talking about the Insurrection Act. He is still talking about deploying troops. He is still talking about showing strength and restoring order. So the question is, what happens next? Here is what you need to understand about the stakes. This is the most public military pushback against a sitting president in modern history. We have had disagreements before. We have had generals who privately opposed presidential decisions. We have had leaks and books and anonymous sources. But we have never had top military brass stand up on live TV and tell the president, "No, you are wrong. What you are asking is unconstitutional, and we are not doing it." That is a huge deal because the military is supposed to be apolitical. The whole system is built on civilian control of the military. The president is the commander-in-chief. The military follows orders. That is how it works. Except the military also takes an oath to the Constitution, and if the president gives an order that violates the Constitution, the military is supposed to refuse. That is the check. That is the balance. And that is exactly what Milley and these other generals are saying. They are saying Trump's orders cross a line. They violate the Constitution, so we are not following them. But here is the problem. That puts the military in an impossible position, because now they are making political decisions. They are deciding which orders are constitutional and which are not. They are publicly opposing the president, and that opens up a whole can of worms about who is really in charge. Trump's supporters are already saying the generals are staging a coup. They are saying the deep state is trying to undermine the president. They are saying this is proof that the military is corrupt and disloyal. Trump's critics are saying no, the generals are doing their job. They are protecting the Constitution. They are standing up to an authoritarian power grab. Who is right? Legally, the generals probably are. The Posse Comitatus Act is pretty clear. The military cannot be used for domestic law enforcement except in very specific circumstances, and Trump's training grounds plan does not fit those circumstances. It is almost certainly illegal, but politically, this is a disaster. Because now you have half the country thinking the military is staging a rebellion, and the other half thinking the military is the only thing standing between us and dictatorship. That fractures trust. That destabilizes everything. Trump's response makes everything worse. He could have played this smart. He could have said, okay, I hear your concerns. Let us review the legal issues. Let us find a way to work together. Let us de-escalate. But that is not what he did. Instead, he called Milley a traitor. He suggested Milley might deserve the death penalty. He doubled down on his plans. He went full scorched earth. And that tells you everything you need to know about where Trump's head is at. He is not backing down. He is not compromising. He is treating this like a loyalty test. You are either with him or you are the enemy. There is no middle ground. That is dangerous because it means this is going to escalate. Trump is going to keep pushing. The generals are going to keep resisting. And at some point, something is going to break. Maybe Trump tries to fire Milley and the other generals. Maybe he tries to replace them with people who will do what he wants. Maybe he tries to invoke the Insurrection Act anyway and see who follows orders. Or maybe Congress steps in. Maybe there are investigations. Maybe there are impeachment talks again. Maybe the courts get involved. But one way or another, this does not just go away. This could shift public opinion in a big way. Trump has always had strong support among military families and veterans. That has been one of his core bases. People who have served, they tend to lean conservative. They tend to support Trump. But this changes the calculus. Because now you have top generals, people with decades of service, people with combat experience, people who have dedicated their lives to the military, saying Trump is dangerous, saying he is violating the Constitution, saying what he is doing is wrong. And that might make some military families rethink their support. Polling data shows that trust in the military is still really high in this country. People respect generals. They respect military leadership. So when those leaders say Trump is out of line, people listen. Will that be enough to flip Trump supporters? Probably not. His base is loyal. They have stuck with him through everything. They are not going to abandon him because some generals disagree with him. But swing voters, independents, moderate Republicans who are already uncomfortable with some of Trump's behavior, this could be the thing that pushes them away. And in a close election, that matters. The Insurrection Act fight is far from over. Trump is still pushing to invoke it. He is still talking about deploying troops, and he is not going to stop just because some generals said no on TV. So the question is, what is his next move? Does he try to find different generals? Does he go around the Pentagon? Does he try to use other federal forces like DHS or the National Guard? And what do the generals do if he actually invokes the Insurrection Act? Do they follow orders? Do they resign in protest? Do they openly refuse and face consequences? This is uncharted territory. We do not have a playbook for this. We do not know what happens when the president and the military are in open conflict like this. But here is what we do know. This is a constitutional crisis in the making. This is about fundamental questions of power and authority and the rule of law. And it is happening in real time on live TV with the whole country watching. So where does this go from here? Honestly, nobody knows. Trump could back down, he could pivot to something else, he could decide this fight is not worth it, or he could dig in. He could make this his hill to die on, he could turn this into the defining fight of his second term. And if he does that, if he really pushes this, then we are looking at a full-blown showdown between the president and the military. We are looking at court battles, congressional investigations, maybe even talk of the 25th Amendment or impeachment again. This is huge, this is historic, and this is just getting started. One thing is for sure, this story is not going away anytime soon. The generals drew a line, Trump crossed it, and now we are going to see what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. The cameras were rolling, the world was watching, and what happened in that room at Quantico will be studied for decades. A four-star general looked the President of the United States in the eye and called him a traitor, not behind closed doors, not in a leaked conversation, on live television, with the whole country watching. And the president's response was to suggest that maybe that general should be executed. That is where we are. That is the moment we are living through. And whatever comes next, it is going to be even crazier. Stay tuned.